A full moon in Sagittarius in the mutable axis, squaring Saturn, which is also there in the mutable axis. This is a kind of a chaotic, mutable full moon, and we're going to break it down. You may be feeling it here this weekend, and we're going to talk about some of the big astrological themes coming up in the next 2 weeks. Stay tuned. Full moon Sagittarius, mutable, kind of chaotic energy. All right, glad to be here, glad to be with you for another video breaking down the ongoing transiting syzygies, breaking down the ongoing astrology. My name is S.J. Anderson, welcome to the channel. That's what I do here, talk about transits, try to contextualize ongoing symbolic themes that emerge from our astrology and deliver it to you here on this channel. And yeah, it's been a little bit of a crazy week for me. This mutable energy, Sun, square, Saturn, it really did throw me for a little bit of a loop. I was scheduling to record this and it just didn't quite work out. I thought I had more time than I did, and then just certain things got in the way. Definitely feeling that chaotic, mutable energy here. And so this video will be out probably even maybe right around the time that the full moon perfects, maybe a little after. I know, not ideal, but still with these videos, what I'm trying to do is break down a lot of the upcoming 2 weeks. And so I hope it's still quite valuable. If you're watching this, let's say Sunday, Monday, you can just go to those timestamps, click on some of the upcoming themes and transits. There's a lot happening this half of the lunation, actually. A lot of stuff that is very interesting, I think, and a big shift in energy. One of the defining transits of the summer emerges here with Venus's entry into Leo. I'm going to break all of that down. So first things first, let's look at this chart of the full moon syzygy, full moon in Sagittarius, right in the 14th degree. And you can see Saturn right off the bat is in that 8th degree of Pisces, making a square, a kind of wide orb square, but still 6 degrees orb squaring Saturn is quite palpable, I think. And a lot of us may be feeling that, particularly with the early stages of Saturn and Pisces. We're still in these early phases. Saturn entered Pisces in early March. We're only here in early June, a mere less than 3 months into this, what will be almost a 3-year transit. So when you have a syzygy in the mutable axis that then activates Saturn in the mutable axis, it very much is a time to touch base. How is your Saturn and Pisces transit going? Everybody has a whole sign house that Pisces comprises. There's a whole set of house topics that Saturn is really asking us pretty directly, maybe begging us to say, hey, consider those house topics. Consider the new foundations you want to have laid in that house with those house topics by the time everything moves out of Pisces in February 2026. Saturn is out of Pisces, Neptune is out of Pisces, and they meet there in that epic degree, 0 degrees, or Aries 1, the very first degree of the zodiac. But we have this long game transit with Saturn and Pisces. This is the syzygy, first one with Saturn there. None of the Pisces season syzygies, that new moon in Pisces or the full moon in Virgo, had Saturn in Pisces yet. So this is really the first time to kind of pause and check in. Additionally, and I'll talk about this some later, Saturn is in the degree of its retrograde station. Every time Saturn stations retrograde or direct, it's a time to pique the interest in what's happening with the Saturn transits, what houses they're in. So this is now here with this full moon, Saturn in the 8th degree of Pisces. It's really begging us, look at Saturn, talk about Saturn, think about Saturn. Of course, I've been doing it every video. I mean, to me, Saturn in Pisces is the defining transit, particularly when you have the Sun squaring Saturn. So this mutable season, mutable Gemini solar season, we talk about Saturn and Pisces because Saturn's a key player. All right, so just coming back into the chart here, you've got the event of 4 June 2023, 3:41 UTC, 5:41 Central European Time. It's actually, less than 12 hours from where I am. It's like 8 hours from when I'm recording this. Like I said, my schedule went haywire. It was quite chaotic. My plans did not come through in terms of my scheduling. So I'm here making it as the sun is about to set here and that moon is about to rise. So this really is kind of a full moon record as I talk about this chart. But Venus in Cancer send-off, major theme with the syzygy, because this is the last day or so of Venus in Cancer. And we've enjoyed Venus in the sign of its day triplicity, in a night sect sign where Venus is of the sect. We enjoy pleasures of the night and pleasures of the comfort and the nurturance, all the stuff we've been talking about here the last few videos. This syzygy really is a peak of it. So I hope you had a good weekend with Venus in Cancer, and maybe this Sunday as you watch this video, you get the final day of Venus in Cancer, resting on Sunday, doing some of that Venusian nourishment that is so evocative when we think about a transit like Venus in Cancer. What do I have here? Reach into the pleasures of nature, the comforts of home, the hidden truths to be discovered there, and seek outward. You might be seeking outward, right? Full moon in Sagittarius, fire sign, outer world oriented. But we then find things inward. We're seeking outward, and it's like, well, actually we have it all already in our home life and with the people we love and with our family. And that's the great signature of this full moon, is that you have the Venus-Jupiter mutual reception still embedded here, yet the full moon is averse. It's not making an aspect to that looping mutual reception with the benefics. And so there's this question of, as you get excited and want to explore your outer world and get ready for the end of spring and into the summer and the summer plans and everything's moving and shaking out there, what about the comforts that are waiting for you and that are waiting to take you in and nourish and nurture you? They're still here this weekend. So some of that tension as we transition out of the Cancer and Venus activations pretty soon here, and by the end of this half of the lunation, all we're going to have left is Jupiter in Taurus and Saturn in Pisces. The rest of the planets will be in these active, either fire or air signs, Gemini and Leo. And I want to bring in a little bit of just some technical astrology, some education here. Empress Atlantis, a friend of mine, their account on Twitter, one of my favorites. But they quoted here a Robert Hand lecture from a conference in the aughts, this old classic Robert Hand lecture where he breaks down what is reception, what does it mean in astrology. And so reception is when you have a planet and then one of the rulers of the sign that that planet is in makes a Ptolemaic aspect to that planet. The rulers can seat and support the planet in the sign that it's traveling through. And so Robert Hand talks about in this video when you have a planet in a domicile or excitation of another planet, but they do not make an aspect. It's not a mutual reception. It's actually something called a generosity. I've always thought about it as an exchange of signs because there's no aspect. There's no ability to communicate between the planets. That dissonance is present. It's just that the planets are mixing with similar energies, and therefore you're kind of doubling up on those planetary themes, even though there still might be a dissonance and a disconnection is how I think about it. You can watch that full lecture here, Reception with Robert Hand, just type that into YouTube. But it's a core delineation technique, and it's based on the foundation of the system, which is rulership. And so we want to think about that anytime we look at a chart. It's a core technique for when I do natal astrology as well. And so when you come back to the chart, you can see Venus in Cancer is actually not making an aspect to the moon. So the moon rules Cancer, but does not support through aspect. And then Jupiter rules Sagittarius in Taurus, does not support the moon via aspect, but the sign of Taurus is ruled by the moon by exaltation. And so there is this generosity between moon Jupiter that may, because it kind of doubles up these combinations of moon and Jupiter. What are they? Exploring and justice and expansion of the physical nurturance of the body and of the self and of the nature of reality, the deep sense of the matrix that we're in. Maybe even be a little foresight, that can be the moon. And Jupiter is a dose of truth and justice. So, there's these kind of big picture moon-Jupiter combinations that are present in this chart. But it still is this dissonant nature of without making an aspect. And that's why I have here, we're seeking outward maybe the fullness of this mutable confusion. Moon square Saturn. Sagittarius moon square Pisces Saturn. Opposite moon, opposite Gemini sun. Very confusing sometimes mutability because there's two zones that are simultaneously operative. And which one is real? Where am I going? Am I going forward or backward? Transitioning out of what was into what will be sometimes can be hard to see, like a fog. Maybe that's a good delineation for Pisces, or even just a sea of language. Gemini can be that. Have you ever seen those word clouds and it's just all these different words? Sometimes it's hard what is being said, what is being communicated, or sentences that just are nonsensical. Some writers just write too much or say too much. Maybe I'm guilty of that sometimes. But these are all the confusions that we may be drawn into. Well, during all of this, you've had this moon-Jupiter nourishment, truth through the body, and the generosity between moon and Jupiter. All right, next technique I just want to layer in here. Just doing a little bit of lecturing, I guess, on some of the techniques I like. I hope you find this useful, but there's something called a dispositor tree. And this is a diagram that shows the connections between the planets in a chart. You just type it into Brave browser. I love it now. They have a little summarizer that I guess is AI driven but it pulls from the web, and this was a really nice definition, I think, of a dispositor tree. A simple core idea is you're looking at the connection between planets in a chart. And they have here below, the dispositor tree shows the backstory and how the energy is flowing behind the scenes of a chart. It's certainly the back end, because it's the core of the nativity, is the rulership and the relationships. The front part of it is just like Moon and Sagittarius. That's just the surface. We know in this chart there's a whole other thing happening. It's really the core of it. Starsology.com had a nice graphic, dispositor tree layers, and you can see, this would be the final dispositor in the red. That feeds the planets in its signs, and then those planets feed other planets, but ultimately you'll get a final dispositor that's not being fed by any other planet. You're building these relationships, and you can use any form of rulership. The reason why the domicile rulership, I think, is the most potent is that all planets rule signs. And with Egyptian terms, the sun and moon don't get Egyptian terms. With exaltations, there's several signs that have no exaltation, so the tree would just stop there. There's these planets that don't relate to that tree. Domicile dispositor trees are elegant and complete. So this is why we use them. And you can just layer in other forms as useful. I always layer in. I've come to do this. I've learned you have to do it. You have to layer in exaltation, triplicity, and then even Egyptian term to really understand the robustness of what's happening in the chart behind the scenes, as that website said. I think it's more just the core energy. It's like the root or core. And then there's the outward expression that's more surface. And so we come back into the full moon in Sagittarius. By domicile, this tree is moon in Sagittarius. You can see that ruled by Jupiter in Taurus. That's ruled by Venus in Cancer. Moon in Sagittarius, Jupiter in Taurus, Venus in Cancer. And this is the loop. This is the tripartite or triplicate, three-headed planetary final dispositor. And all of these then become important because they all need and rely on each other. And again, it underscores, you have this outward Sagittarian, real fiery, passionate, let's go seek out there, let's go find some truth and explore. Yet the energies are pulling us back into the home, right? The double moon energy with Cancer and Taurus, they're pulling us back into the sense pleasures, which sensations certainly can be found when we're out exploring, but usually you need to stop. Even when you're traveling, you stop, you get your Airbnb or your hotel, then you spend a few days in a place taking in these sensations. And so this, I think, is almost like a push-pull energy. We're going to seek with the moon, but we need to stop and engage with the sensual components of the reality around us. So there's a little bit of a dissonance in this moon, and then all the while it's square Saturn. I haven't even brought that back in much detail, but I talked about it earlier. So it really can be more of a tense energy, and I say chaos has been my favorite word, a little bit of a chaotic, a dash of chaos, a dash of kind of hold on and let's work through this mutable peak of the lunation cycle with this full moon. And so here finally is my Saturn and Pisces slide. You can see it's dominating again, dominating the sun earlier in the zodiacal order. And it's squaring both the sun and moon. So anytime we talk about a planet, the first step is, what is the planet? That's always the best way into any chart, in my view. What does that planet evoke? What does it signify? And so we can just start here. How is Saturn affecting this full moon? What is it doing? Let's start with what Saturn is. Limitations. It can be confusions if you think about Saturn and Pisces. The limitations of Saturn, the long game, the slowness, the almost sadness of this is the trap I am in, this is how I am bound up. These are the kind of things of Saturn. The grief that might arrive with that. But then ultimately the realization that this binding actually has produced something very powerful that can raise one up often in what Betty Fallon's calls great ranks. So Saturn is the long game and the stay-it-with-itness. And that energy in Pisces, confusion, it's the creativity that can come out of that confusion, the kind of cries and the creative bursts that are a direct result of frustration and grief and despair. So Saturn and Pisces can work very well together to produce kind of new, spontaneous bursts of creative power that then can be the basis for some kind of long-term creative school or style of art. And then changeability and mutation can go on for a long time, and that's something to keep in mind, especially with Saturn in a mutable sign. These periods of change and transition can take a lot of time to resolve. And then that's one of the big lessons of Saturn and Pisces, is like just staying with the unknown and staying with these liminal spaces of maybe being in limbo or waiting or pondering. This can go on for a while, and I think it's good to keep that in mind with a full moon like this. We might be realizing here now in June, okay, this is the Saturn and Pisces story. Wow, this is what I'm working through now for the next 2 years, two or more years. And just, face it. I mean, I just sounds a little tough love, but I think that is good advice. Just there's realizations around what exactly we're facing in terms of this period of change and mutation. What do I have here? It can take quite a while for the old to leave and the new to arrive. And sometimes we're just waiting for both to happen simultaneously. Okay, because Saturn is in Pisces, checking just in with the news stories, I can type in, what are the oceans? What's the news around the oceans? And we have Saturn and Pisces bringing those issues up. Pisces is a sign that signifies oceans. It's the largesse of the water element because Jupiter is the ruler. The sea's always changing, like Jupiter and mutable energy is. And so I was at the sea last weekend. It was amazing. It's always different colors. The sky and the weather is always changing. It's always a little bit different how it's hitting the rocks or what the sounds are based on the weather pattern and the wind. So it's this great mutable Piscean ocean. Let's check in. Are there problems with the ocean? Yes. There's these stories about plastic I keep seeing. Here's Salon.com, Matthew Rosa. A new report analyzed previous studies and reached sobering conclusions about the plastic pollution crisis. We're dealing with a collective plastic pollution crisis. I think it's both part of the age of Aquarius that we've entered with Saturn and Jupiter's conjunction in Aquarius, or the age of air in terms of the medieval great conjunction element technique. And you now have Saturn coming to Pisces showing us how this technology, plastic, we're now causing problems with it. We may have to figure out solutions. I think it's going to take a long time to get on the other side of this. I mean, everywhere I look, plastic there on my dish soap, plastic there on a little bottle of vinegar that I have, plastic there on my toaster, plastic, 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 plastic. It's everywhere. And it's gathering in these oceans. Boy, I hope they can come up with a solution to that. But a syzygy like this can highlight the themes. You can see as we're building into this full moon, we start getting more stories about the plastic crisis. Salon.com, another article, also by Matthew Rosa. I guess he's writing about the sea here for Salon, but he's talking about destroying species for profit and mining, that corporations are planning to mine the deep ocean. There's 5,000 new species that were just discovered, and they may be killing these things off to try to get some profit. This is also a Saturn theme of putting profit before human life, the kind of cold, hard, sacrificial attitude that can cause real wreckage. And, the ocean, we're in this ocean, we are made of water, water is life. One of the best things that happened with that pipeline protest, I think, was the water is life slogan that became popular. It's so true. I'm looking for more water is life. The oceans need our support, and we need to clean up our water, our relationship to water and our water supplies. More of these stories as we get into February 2026. So Tony Bourdain, always got to bring Tony Bourdain in when you start talking Sagittarius, because it is this outer world mutation, i.e. travel. It's a classic signification, I think, of Jupiter and Jupiter in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius itself is this movement out with ourself and trying to either find ourselves through seeking new locations and seeking adventures and seeking experiences, or kind of knowing who we are and then wanting to share it by traveling and going out into the outer world through things like a lecture series or a traveling scheduled talks, or even like comedians who travel and share their wisdom, truth, and justice. But just to bring in Tony Bourdain, Anthony Bourdain, I love this guy. I didn't even follow him much while he was alive. When he passed on, I went back and realized his genius because it was such a big event. The guy's an awesome writer and an awesome thinker and a real truth teller. A lot of Jupiter that he embodies. Look, he's got Jupiter in Leo in the first house. You can really feel that with Anthony Bourdain. This is a time that was based on someone witnessing him getting an astrology reading on one of his shows, and they used a Vedic zodiac and then tried to backwork it to the tropical zodiac. My sense is that he's probably Leo rising based on that. Unsure what Ayan Amsha was being used, so it might be the degrees may be off, that midheaven degree might be off. But here's the quote: travel changes you as you move through this life, in this world. You change things slightly. You leave marks behind, however small. And in return, life and travel leaves marks on you. Quite, I think, relevant when we think about this mutable syzygy full moon in Sagittarius square Saturn, opposite Sun and Gemini, right? Changing. We're being changed. Life changes you. Travel, but also life changes you. We move through life, we move through the world, things are always changing, ever so slightly. Marks are left on us, that's Saturn and Pisces, right? That's Saturn. These little marks, we get branded with our experiences. It's worth considering this, how travel is also tough on the body and family. Change is tough on the body and family. You got to move houses, you got to pack up your stuff, put it in storage, put it into the new house, then unpack it. Moving is very, very difficult. There's not the routines of sleep, not the routines of meal time that one is used to. Travel, new bed every night, new bed every few nights. It really can be hard on the body. And to me, this is that dissonance between Sagittarius, Taurus, and Cancer. You see there's no aspect and they make no connection. And this is what we're, I think, having to choose between right now. Remember, this is 2 weeks of energy. So you might think about this mutable peak here as Gemini season continues. We don't get the sun changing signs. Won't be until the next video that I talk about the sun entering Cancer. But we have this Gemini sun square Saturn for the next little while. And this is the notion of how change can be difficult. Sometimes it's hard to even know how to describe what's happening. Like, I just don't know what I'm going through right now. It just feels chaotic. Help, help, help. Please. And then sometimes we just have to ride out a few days of being busy and unexpected schedules and unexpected movement before there can finally be a time to rest and kind of regenerate and just kind of ask what is happening and try to grapple with it linguistically. That's the sun in Gemini trying to work things out verbally. And then that square from Saturn saying, hey, you might take a little bit while longer to even articulate even one sentence. I feel this way. Underline. How do you fill that in? I don't know. I'm just trying to get through this chaotic moment or this chaotic zone. And just come back into Bourdain's chart. Why don't we do a little bit of delineation? He's got that North Node in Sag, so this kind of going towards or appetites for adventure, and he's creating with those adventurous appetites. That's the 5th house. And yet there's a dissonance between maybe his obligations as a householder or parent and the struggles that he might bring in, personal struggles of the 12th house. You can see a lot of this in his life, some of these tensions when you check out his biography. That movie, Roadrunner, loved it. It's a documentary about him and some of his troubles and the tensions between his work and his creativity and his family life and all of that. Big part of what Tony Bourdain went through, and I think he's a nice nativity here to bring in. So I want to shift now. The major transit, the big story, the big story of this second half of the lunation is Venus entering Leo. Venus enters Leo 5 June 2023 on Monday. You have that ingress of Venus's entry into Leo. This is why I was saying Sunday, enjoy that final Venus and Cancer day and appreciate the softness of that Cancer Venus and the more internalized beautification. Because when Venus enters Leo, it kicks off a major transit. Over 4 months of Venus in Leo. It does not leave Leo finally until 9 October when it enters Virgo, and it spends a full 40 days and 40 nights retrograde cycle, a full retrograde cycle in Leo. So everybody get ready, because what is Venus mean? It's beauty, adornment, pleasure, unity, relationships, desires, hopes. All of the Venusian will experience a block and delay and a review for that 40 days and 40 nights. That begins on the 23rd of September with a retrograde station and ends on 4 September with a direct station. Blocks get removed and then we move forward again. So everybody be prepared for this. I mean, what kind of things could this be? I've seen in the past old lovers come back, old love relationships, old friends all reemerge upon a Venus retrograde station. I've seen appearance changes. Some of you might remember I used to have long hair on this channel. I chopped it off during a Venus retrograde. I didn't even think I would ever do that. And I just woke up, couldn't get it out of my head. Boom, I had my normal haircut that I grew up with down in Texas. We always get buzz cuts as the young men. We'd be sent to get buzz cuts in my family, kind of a conservative family. And I've returned to that old appearance, perfect for Venus retrograde. So those are just some examples to be on the lookout for. Of course, it's custom to your nativity, the house of your nativity, where the retrograde cycle will be, may definitely give us an additional layer of symbolic information about how you may be experiencing this. The other thing, it's a major alteration because Venus loses dignity. It had day triplicity rulership in Cancer. Venus now is peregrine, what we call peregrine in Leo. That is to say, no dignity in the sign, no whole sign dignity. Now it will enjoy some Egyptian term dignity there. in the second half, the second half of the first decan, and then the first degree of the second decan. But you know, our Venus might get a little bit more challenging here in a fire sign. That shakes Venus up. You might not have time to do your makeup. You might not have time to shave, or you know, these are the kind of fire sign Venus combination. And then you add in Mars, and you get this additional major shakeup. And what do I have here? Fire is Leo, plus fire Mars, plus desire is Venus. And this can be a very combustive combination. The planet of desire and hope, what we want, what we think we need and want, has to get jostled with Mars and its breakage. And then in the fire sign Leo, which is like these deeper sense of self. So, you know, there could be a lot of grappling with who we think we are and struggling to let go of what the reality is telling us that we are or aren't. You know, Mars can chip away and cut away. You know, you go into the tradition, you read any ancient astrologer, and you look when they talk about combinations of Venus and Mars, not cool stuff often. Love affairs, you know, it's like that toxic love affair that won't go away. All kinds of difficulties in relationships with Venus and Mars, because the planets of relationships, they're opposite each other in terms of the zodiacal framework, and they're brought together. It can just be too much of someone wants this or believes this or wants to break free. Another person has a desire and wants this, and there's these competing desires. You know, what I think about here is this thing, I've seen it online recently. You put the black ants and the red ants in a jar and shake it up, and then you set it down and they start attacking each other. But if you don't shake it up, they're fine. They just hang out. When you shake it up, they go after each other. And I'm a little concerned just with this transit, because particularly the Venus-Mars component, in a certain way, it's more concerning because Mars is there. The fire of Mars adds to the passion of Venus. In another way, and this is what people are saying online when I post this, and by the way, there's always a continuum of meaning in delineations. We might actually really like this, to have Venus helping Mars, assisting Mars, and you get this kind of hot girl summer, or this ability to kind of shine your beauty, you know, step into your powers and say, here I am beautiful, see me, you know, passionately acting from a centering of one's beauty and knowledge of their own beauty and knowledge of what they desire and what they value. And I certainly think all those things are in play. I don't want to, you know, as an astrologer, my job is not to say, this is definitely how the symbol is going to be for you. I would never do that. Some astrologers, that's how they read. I do not do it. I say, here, it sounds like this is what's happening. Okay, this is symbolically appropriate. Here are some other ways this symbol may be playing into your life as well, and you may want to lean into this symbolic way to see it. And that can sometimes open up visioning for how we want to envision our lives, using astrology as a justification for the stories we tell. I have here love affairs, wars, Mars and Venus kind of mirror each other. This is something I've learned the longer I practice, is that Mars and Venus are very similar. They're a pair by the zodiacal scheme. They are opposite each other, so they pair off. And that is to say, the nodes are always in Mars and Venus ruled signs. They're never in signs ruled by Mars without being in a sign ruled by Venus. They're in a pair on an axis, the Libra-Aries axis, the Taurus-Scorpio axis. So this idea of keep your enemies close, keep your friends close, your enemies closer, this idea of that we hate those that we actually love, or that you can't love without hate, or you can't hate without love. You know, the idea that being heartbroken is the most difficult thing there is, but you don't get heartbroken unless you experience the joys of a flowering, beautiful love, and then it doesn't work out for whatever reason, and then we're left with that broken heart. Venus and Mars pair off. They conspire together for all of these intense transpirings relationally. That's part of this moment. You know, Babylon Anana, the god of war, the goddess of war, that is Venus. And now we have Mars and Venus, again, a mirroring of signification. I think this thing in Ukraine, it's not looking good. Every day we come closer to what they're saying is an invasion by the Ukrainians, or a retaking of some of the lands. I think they're calling it a counter strike, or a counteroffensive. That could be happening, and that would fit perfectly, these two planets of war. Actually, the first phase of the Ukraine war had Venus and Mars in Aquarius. It was that Venus retrograde in Capricorn with Mars, and then they joined and were co-present in Aquarius during the height of that initial phase of fighting. So we're now opposite that, and Venus and Mars are co-present in hitting those same degrees. But of course, there's always more happening. I mean, that's just one layer. 2 planets of relationship and passion and desire and breaking free and all of that, heat, in a sign of heat. But what else is going on? First of all, where's the sun? Domicile Lord of Leo. Look where the sun is. Right in Gemini for this next 2 weeks, this half of the lunation. I have here, so right away we go back to that reception lesson. Look at the sun's receiving that co-presence. It can support vis-a-vis reception. And that means what the sun is doing right now is linguistic solar, right? The consciousness of language and identification and curiosity and ordering and all of it. That verbalism and curiosity will serve us right now. It's an outlet. It protects and supports the Mars-Venus story. So all this passion and heat that comes with Venus and Mars, these are maybe ideas. You can think about texting, and maybe you feel like you're over-texting. Well, no, this is a good time to lean in on Mercury to try to process those intensities. If you're communicating too much, I would say no. I would lean on maybe more rather than less communication right now. As that Gemini sun receives Venus and Mars co-present in Leo, you also, you have that modulation, that Gemini modulation to guide us through any kind of relational intensity that we're going through right now. But we got to keep in mind, it's still square Saturn and Pisces. And that's still a really big deal. It's this ultimate Saturn. You see, it's driving everything right now. You know, Saturn, it's the sextile and the square that Saturn is behaving here in this way in the chart. So Saturn is very important to consider and feed. And I want to bring in this picture. I just watched it. Great film. I'm so sad that I didn't watch it until now. 2017 Lady Bird, director Greta Gerwig. It's an autobiographical film. Greta Gerwig from Sacramento is writing a film about a character in Sacramento. But one of the major features of it, and this is spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Lady Bird, just skip ahead to the next timestamp, but letters become a very important part of the plot because the mother character is afraid there's too much pressure that this mother character has put on herself. She wrote letters to her daughter to try to process the relational intensities, but never sent them because she was worried about grammar mistakes, was afraid it wasn't going to be perfect. That's that Saturn overcoming from Pisces. It's the pressure we put that it's not perfect, and so we're going to stay silent. And what happens in the film, the daughter goes to school, and the dad sends the box of letters that mom never sent. And it creates this cathartic emotional experience for the daughter at the end of the picture. And so again, it's Saturn delaying writing letters. We can use Gemini as the received ruler that's receiving Mars and Venus to write letters that maybe we don't want to send. Maybe we delay that until a more auspicious time. It's a therapeutic technology that's greatly suggested by a lot of therapists. I've used it. You know, if I've cut off as someone or we're just on no contact with a former relationship, they cut me off, okay? Or, you know, but just healthy no contact. Instead of trying to reach out and stir the pot, you know, that Venus retrograde, Venus co-present Mars, then maybe let's reach out, let's stir the pot, but no, it's no contact. And that's what I'm doing because it's healthier. And so I'm going to write letters and not send them. Still get to process, still get to use the Gemini and the Mercurial to process, but it's not trigger. It's not a trigger that might stir up an otherwise dormant dynamic. So next is Refranation. This is core to understanding the next half of the lunation. It's core to understanding what will happen between Venus and Mars. Venus and Mars are co-present. They're mixing in the same sign. Because they're in the same sign, they share the same rulers. By night, Jupiter rules. By day, the sun rules. And by night, the sun rules by domicile. So they both give over to certain sectors of the sky. They rely on Taurian energy because Jupiter's in Taurus. They rely on Gemini energy because the sun is in Gemini. And so that is why co-presence is such an important thing. They share the same house. They're living in the same space. And therefore they have to rely on the same things. And so they're mixing just by being in the same sign. However, this aspect gets close and close and close. And on this day, 2 July 2023, at 3:16 p.m. UTC, they begin separating because Venus stops, slows and slows and slows and slows because it's about to go backward, and Mars keeps going. Mars is speeding up, actually, because it was retrograde in Gemini for so long. And they don't meet. They refrain from perfecting the aspect. In astrology, it's called Refranation. And I think this is extremely important to consider. So this is 2 July, they begin separating. We're here, I'm recording this on 6 3 June. We have a whole month where these two planets of relationship and heat and combustion are getting close and close and close, and then they separate. And what I think it means is that it's the love affair that almost consummates. You know, the events that are inflamed, but then they flame out. They actually don't come to a resolution. So just be aware of this, everyone. I mean, if you're in a new relationship, a nascent connection with someone, be aware that there's a refranation with the two relational planets that's happening now. From 5 June, when Venus enters Leo, maybe it kicks up and there's this desire, but then things sort of fizzle out. Knowing this is going to help you. It's going to help you be a little bit more cautious in your affairs, and I mean all kinds of affairs, not just love. It's going to help you understand if, you know, someone gets cold feet, or if there's circumstances that arise and interfere or impede what seemed like a connection or a flow. Just know it's the sky. It's the symbols in the sky. It's the astrology. And we're waiting here. We're going to have a purge with Venus. Venus will go to the underworld, and then it will meet the sun in the inferior conjunction in August, be purified and reborn as a morning star. And then Venus and Mars actually make no Ptolemaic aspect until February. They meet in Aquarius. So the Venus-Mars dance for the rest of the year is like not communicating, almost communicating. There's a sextile they almost perfect, but don't perfect. And then they finally meet again in February. Just have some patience with your relationships. That's my advice to you. You know, have patience. Give them room to have a slow simmer, or a little bit of a delay, or people changing minds, or people considering more deeply their desires or wants. That's all Venus-Mars. And let it unfold here for the rest of 2023. And you can see here that's 22 February. They actually conjoin in Aquarius. And the last aspect they made was 11 March. They had that sextile from Gemini what was that? It was Gemini Aries. And so here it is, the other thing. If we're just looking at the Venus and Leo transit, right away this week on 8 June, Venus will square the lunar nodes. That is to say, Venus will be at the north bending. And I think that's an important part of what's happening with Venus right out of the gate. We're tapping into the nodes of fate as we get into this whole rebirth of Venus here in Leo and the co-presence with Mars. So I find the nodes very important in synastry and in relationships. We find those soulmates, those people that we're here to, our soul family, you might say. People you meet and you're like, wow, I've met you before and I know it, yet you've never seen them actually in this lifetime, but there's an inner knowing. The astrology can, with the nodes in particular, can't explain that. I've seen quite often. So maybe, you know, be prepared here for these kind of unseen realms being shook here a little bit. And then we get into this Venus story of the Venus retrograde later in the summer. But then I said, might 2023 turn out to be a missed connections year? By that, I don't mean completely unaware, right? Even in missed connections, like on Craigslist, one person sees the other. It's hot for a second. There's an attraction. It just doesn't quite work out. All right, and until later. And that's all I want you all to be aware of, a sense of things maybe needing a little bit more of a time to develop. Let's just put it that way, and be reborn, and then we're kicking off a new Venus cycle. And I don't have a slide here on this, but just keep in mind, 2015 is the year we're looking at. That's the Venus star point, the last time Venus was retrograding in the same part of the sky. I'll talk more about that in later videos as we get closer to that retrograde station exactly. All right, and another important component, just like I talked about the sun in Gemini receiving by domicile Mars and Venus and Leo, I want to now talk about Jupiter and Taurus receiving by night triplicity, Venus and Mars and Leo. And that square between Taurus and Leo, Jupiter and Venus and Mars, they're mutually receiving each other at night, which is the first thing. This is some kind of support, some kind of agreement to share resources between Jupiter and Venus, between Leo and Taurus, especially at nighttime. And it might mean that during this Venus transit in Leo, this whole time until October, night may be a little bit easier. You might want to schedule things for night, knowing that Jupiter kicks into a mutual reception. We think about Leo with Venus, self-beautification, presenting the self. This is who I am, and this is how I look, as a way to signal my identity. But that can create tension sometimes. The square is tension, right? With the creativity that requires staying with a project that needs attention. Our outer attention needs to be given to the work of art. It's not my appearance. I'm not the work of art. The art is the art, not me. And so where does self come in with the creativity process? Who is the author, that great philosophical idea? Was that Roland Barthes, I think? Who is the author of the work? Is it the self? Can we remove the art from the artist? All of these questions are brought in, and my sense is that the alternative to this idea of keeping out of the work and letting the work live and breathe, not injecting an identity, is the tension where the comfort with self fuels generativity. One almost has to be comfortable in the skin, in a moment of creativity, to be that channel for the creative juice. Settling in and a sense of comfort with the identity can be an essential component. Like, okay, this is who I am and what I do. A lot of great artists, they're just in routines of writing. I think about Bukowski or any of these other prolific writers that just write every day and write all the time. That's just who they are. That's the identity, that's the self, that's how it acts. Mars and Leo acting from a knowing of the identity. And so that can fuel generativity. That's that mutual reception. We create when we know who we are and know how to be and are comfortable with being. And so this is the tension. I feel like with this square between Jupiter and Taurus and Venus and Leo, very productive squares are. And I think with Mars, the nature of the square is Mars, and Mars being with Jupiter and Mars being with Venus, there can be a lot of action potentially here, especially before Venus goes retrograde, or rather before Mars leaves Leo. Later in July, Mars will leave Leo, or the first part of July. But until then, Mars can really be driving some of this action, I feel like. And this is my meme for Venus and Leo. This is the one I think perfect. If you've seen Pearl, 2022, director Ty West, wonderful picture, Mia Goth, the Brazilian actress. She plays this character who the dream in this story is she wants to go to a dance competition. She auditions. The idea is she gets chosen. She'll be able to travel and be a star. She thinks she's a star. She knows she's a star. And again, spoiler alert. But at the end of the picture, she auditions and doesn't get it. That's Mars breaking the dreams of Venus. That's the square between Jupiter and Venus, that there's some kind of, it just doesn't happen, right? It just is prevented from happening, but peregrine Venus with Mars. And she has this freak out and this emotional breakdown. And it's this classic scene, please, I'm a star, please, I'm a star, she screams. And it's kind of, this might be what happens, like Venus and Leo, like, here I am, I'm beautiful. And then no, Mars and then the retrograde station and moving backward, we don't get what we think we want. We're not who we thought we were, or at least this iteration is not going to pay dividends or pay out. And we're having to then process and grieve and, kind of like a child, the terrible twos. These kids are learning this, they're self-centered a lot of the times at a certain phase of maturation, and they're crying if they don't get the toy or they don't get every little thing they want. I think that can be an element of this Venus and Leo. And again, I think it relates back to Saturn and Pisces, frankly. If we have reconfigurations of self and pleasure and beauty, remember, Saturn in Pisces ruled by Venus. So that Saturn in Pisces will be processed through its exaltation ruler, Venus, going backwards. And it's gonna, we might need some delays and blocks to work through Saturn and Pisces. Venus here fueling one version of that, one iteration of some of the issues that may be emergent here. Please, I'm a star. Put on that scene. Just go type in Pearl, please, I'm a star. Watch the scene. She's really good in that scene, Mia Goth. And what I feel, astrology, like life, is about the stories we tell. And we're telling ourselves who we are at all times. We have an inner dialogue. This is who I am. Affirmation practice is playing with that inner dialogue, programming ourselves to get, program out the messages maybe we were given as children by the culture and family, and programming in messages that we think are more aligned with ourselves and the nature of who we are. I think that that's all part of this process with Venus retrograde too. We will be purifying and crafting new selves that then can be born here and support us for this next cycle. So that's some of the Venus and Leo story. Major transit, we'll be talking about it a lot as we get planets coming into Leo, the inferior conjunction in August, a new moon in Leo, a full moon in Aquarius. All of that's coming, and Venus and Leo will be a major recurrent theme with this astrology until really the end of the year, until we get into the fall months. So this half of the lunation, the next big story I want to bring in is Mercury into Gemini. Mercury had a retrograde, a long retrograde, many weeks. It stationed retrograde in Taurus, stationed direct in Taurus, was with the North Node, was with Jupiter, was with, there was that post-Aries eclipse as it became that Taurus moment. Then there was the Taurus new moon with Mercury there. A whole long story of Mercury in Taurus. That comes to an end. And now we get a power Mercury again. Mercury returns with a vivacity and with a verve here to very much inject the Gemini powers into our lives here. Mercury will enter Gemini on 11 June. It leaves Gemini on 27 June. So it's a fast move. Mercury's moving really fast right now. It's going to blow through Gemini. But while it's there, it's such a great opportunity to write, think, speak, transact, all kinds of business opportunities, all of it, before Mercury shifts into that evening star part of its cycle. So while Mercury is in Gemini, it will be with the Sun for much of the transit. It will square Saturn and Pisces. We've talked already in this video a lot about the Gemini-Pisces square. And then it forms a sextile between Venus and Mercury. And so everything I said earlier about the Gemini, using those Gemini powers with the Sun in Gemini on 11 June until 27 June, it gives a whole double or triple dose of that. Writing the letters and not sending them. Over texting if you need to, not being afraid to communicate if that's what you're feeling like you need to do to resolve the tensions between the squares that are happening in this chart. Look at this chart, 16 June, and you have 3 planets in Gemini. This is right before that Gemini new moon. You have the square between Saturn and the Gemini planets, and then you have the square between Jupiter and the Leo planet. So there's a lot of square tension here. When we get into the later part of this half of the lunation, writing is a wonderful way, and Mercury is a wonderful way to move through tension, through putting it on paper. Major theme of what I talk about, because Mercury is a major theme of life. Mercury is the fastest moving non-luminary. It's always doing stuff and changing and going backwards. It's that's what mercurial means. It's ever changing. So it's a major component of life, expressing ourselves, communication, core and fundamental with Mercury, and I want us to consider it as Mercury is strong here. Remember, it goes under the sun's beams. That's what this chart is, by the way. It's 16 June. Mercury will get close and start traveling under the sun's beams right before that new moon. And so it's really from 11 June until the next new moon, so this next syzygy. So the time is really this waning half of the lunation to dig into Mercury after the 11th of June. The other thing I'll say, and I already talked about this, Saturn is in the degree of its retrograde station here. And this is also the date that Saturn is stationing on the 16th of June. That's huge. And I tweeted about this earlier. I don't have a separate slide for it, but your Saturn in Pisces, I look back at my Saturn return, that first retrograde station of Saturn during my Saturn return, while it was in the sign where my natal Saturn was big. I moved into an apartment, got a new job. That whole month was like a major part of that whole thing that was getting set up for me during my Saturn return. So look for that. Check the chart, the house that Saturn is in your nativity, all of the themes there for this next month. It's going to be in the 8th degree for like a full month. It's in it now. It was like the 1st of June it entered, and I think it's the 2nd of July it leaves this degree where it stations. So very much a moment of punctuation for Saturn in Pisces as it squares Mercury and Gemini, and they can propel each other. Mercury's not powerful now, and this square, while Saturn is earlier in zodiacal order, Mercury has great strength in Gemini. And I think that the sense of being confused, I've talked about it in a few videos with Saturn square Sun. I think that Mercury in Gemini helps us out of that confusion. It can help us move through it using the linguistic, written powers, even games. Mercury and Gemini, just have a little fun, play some games, get light-hearted and just more childlike with how we play in life. That might be just a theme of the Mercury and Gemini. Play like a child and just play through it all, through the tension, through the squares, through the Mars Venus co-presence, through all of it. Just play like a child. Children can't process. You can sit a child down, watch the nightly news. They don't even care. They're just going to have fun with the commercials or play with their toys or whatever. And just to say, even when Mercury goes under the sun's beams, while it's in Gemini, it still is in what we call its chariot. It has the strength while it is in Gemini, being in its own sign. All right, now I'm going to move on to the election part of these videos I've been doing and just check out some of the elections. There's only 2 charts I want to look at, and there's really only one election that I really like for this half of the lunation, and that's going to be the Aries moon trining Venus in Leo. So this Aries moon is safe from Saturn. It's averse to Saturn. It is trine Mars. It is averse from the nodes, its own nodes, and it makes this applying trine to Venus. I can get a chart here on Monday, very early Monday morning, while the moon is closely applying within that same degree in the 6th degree, and the moon is right on the ascendant while Venus is in its joy in the 5th. That might be a nice chart. Either way, my electional principles. Find the moon applying to a benefic and find either the moon on an angle or the benefic on an angle, both in good houses, ideally. And you want to try to have at least one benefic aspecting the ascendant and aspecting the moon. This is the fundamental principles of electional astrology that I like to use and deploy. What might we use something like this for? Well, reception with both the domicile and exaltation rulers, because the moon, the exaltation lord of Aries is the sun, and the domicile lord of Aries is Mars. So this is a chart that really does kick us into this outer world energy that I described at the beginning of the talk. Remember how I was saying everything's shifting into Gemini, Leo, and while we still have the 2 great planets in the so-called feminine, Pisces and Taurus, all of these faster moving planets, including the moon, are in a sign of outer identity, going out into the world and saying, I am me, announcing that to everyone. I am me. That's Leo. That's the classic Leo. I am, right? The sun is the planet of God. It is finds its joy in the house of God. I always love that. I am what I am, or I am that I am, from the Old Testament. This idea that that's how God announces, is just simply I am. There is the Buddha story under the Bo tree, and he just says, why are you enlightened? I think Mara, the devil character in that story, and he says, because I am, I deserve to be enlightened. It's kind of like, it's just my birthright. This is who I am, a king, a spiritual king. And so this might be, so this is what's happening. It's then the tricksterism of the communication with the gods and the verbalism. You might be out there, get on your podcasts and your blog, shine your light. These are great transits for that, while you still have Venus direct in Leo. And this moon trining and sextiling its rulers can be a great, great thing to just shine your light, get out there, speak, talk, write, communicate, be curious, be engaged. Show you who you are. Be that star that Mia Goth is. Be that star. You can announce it. I'm a star. This kind of energy. What do I have here? The fire-air themes, maybe my favorite combination. Probably is my favorite combination. I've got tons of Aries. I love Gemini. And, it's passion, language, action, innovation, detail, power. All of the stuff I just was describing and talking about. 12 June 2023, 1:32 Central European Time is the one I like as it's perfecting. You'll find one in your own location that I think you can like and use. All right, and then the final chart. This isn't any kind of election, but it's worth noting the defining aspect over all of this part of the lunation. So these planets actually don't perfect the sextile Jupiter and Saturn until the 19th. It's after the new moon, the next new moon, but it's applying now. It's within 3 degrees and applying this whole half of the lunation that I'm covering in this video. And so I want you to think about, they're in orb. And this is the definition aspect of the summer. The defining aspect of the summer is this Jupiter-Saturn sextile. The new foundations of trippy, surreal creativity that Jupiter and Taurus allows us to create from a place of this foundation of discovering reality anew, and then creating from the truth of those discoveries. That's how you might think about it. It's in orb, and all of those creative themes I've been talking about video after video, it's gaining steam now. You might want to segregate some time this 2 weeks, get into those dreamy, trippy, creative stuff. Just know those things are gaining steam. This energy is hovering over and supporting everything that we're doing right now, this waning phase of the lunation into the early part of the next new moon cycle. And yeah, earthy creative endeavors, surrealist painting. And you can see, it's just the surrealism that I just was talked about. It's my favorite art school that can capture this. Taurus, Jupiter, Saturn, Pisces. Rene Magritte. His painting's from 1964 or 1946. If it's 1964, it may be Jupiter and Taurus, Saturn and Pisces, or either of those or a combination of those. So very much fitting for the transit. I like how the apple is right on the guy's face. He kind of looks like Saturn. The sea is Pisces. And then you have the earth, the Jupiter and Taurus. It's a wonderful painting. I think it's something like The New Man. I forgot, I think the title is something like that. And then this is my favorite Magritte painting. The Surrealist painting is inspiration, but this painting is called This Is Not a Pipe. There's another name for it, but that's one of the names it's known by. Perfect for Mercury and Gemini, square, Saturn and Pisces. You see a picture of a pipe. It looks like a pipe, but it's not a pipe. Why? Because it's a painting. It's actually canvas and paint. It's not a pipe. So again, those language games that Mercury is so good at, the trickster with language. And we can then ponder this using language, using the writing, there it is, written in cursive, to kick up this deeper, more profound search that is the longer transit of Saturn and Pisces. So use these examples. Maybe you'll write the letter that you don't send. Maybe you'll learn some Duolingo and try to write a letter in a new language. That would be the Mercury in Gemini, square, Saturn, and Pisces. But use these as inspiration. You can type in surrealism, study this school. It might inspire you here as Jupiter and Taurus is applying to sextile Saturn and Pisces. All right. So thanks for being here. Glad I made it. Glad this can be here. Hopefully it can help you over the next period. Prepare for the summer. Remember, Venus in Leo retrograde starts this half of the lunation. Now the retrograde doesn't start, but the story of Venus in Leo, which includes the retrograde, begins. So that alone, I think, is valuable to watch those sections here in this video, because it's going to prepare you for something that could be quite literal in your life this summer. Anyhow, you can go to my website, sjanderson144.com. There you can see my reading schedule and have a wonderful half of this lunation. Enjoy the waning moon energy, the restful energy. Enjoy Venus and Leo, that kick up of passion with Venus and Mars co-present. And we'll talk real soon.